working in the sustainability industry. If you're shipping things offshore just to ship them back again, you're defeating the purpose. Trying to solve local circular outcomes in terms of product. We've created a life for something once already, and we've cleaned the copper to be used in a cable, but then we recover it and ship it overseas for them to make something else with. It seems illogical. When we've got that product in the form that needs to be to perform a certain outcome, why not just recirculate that back directly into the same industry over and over again? That's how I see more on the copper side. The same goes for the PVC. We are so quick to throw things away and buy new that we've already created a perfectly good product that's served its purpose for one life. It's a very problematic waste stream right now, but it's also a great resource to be recirculated back into that same industry. Our recycling outcomes currently aren't extremely circular, but that's what we're trying to solve.
Welcome to Long-Term Thinking for Business Success, a show for and by business owners. Each episode will explore how to beat the odds and create a sustainable business and the life we've dreamt of. Today's guest is Josh Robinson, the founder of J.R. Hammer. As an electrician, Josh gained hands-on experience at ThyssenKrupp and United Lifts. With this technical experience, he co-founded SRS Metals, a family business, in 2013. And within 4 years, he'd achieved a 400% increase in turnover. In 2018, Josh established J.R. Hammer with the goal of transforming industrial scrap into valuable resources by redefining the recovery, processing, and recycling of cables, metals, and PVC. Taking his drive to improve recycling in Australia, he also co-invented Australia's first operational solar PVC recycling plant as the head of recycling at Lotus Energy. Josh is driven by the belief that waste is unnecessary, unintelligent, unsustainable, and uncommercial. Hi, Josh. Welcome to the Engineering Success Podcast, and thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Rick. I look forward to the podcast.
Just to start things off, and so that we've all got the same context, we define the definition of a company's vision is the change it wants to make, or to put it another way, the world it wants to create. With this understanding, what's J.R. Hammer's vision or the change that J.R. Hammer wants to make?
It's a great question. As you mentioned in the intro, I worked in the family scrap metal business before restarting SRS Metals. Over those years, we were a large exporter of insulated copper cables, predominantly going to China, who had essentially very cheap labor, and we're an end consumer of copper. They had the market pretty well sewn up, and their copper extraction processes, even though they were subpar conditions to what we were dealing here within Australia, they were able to get the job done and recover the copper. There was no real emphasis or priority in worrying about what the insulation materials were, and witnessing firsthand the lack of environmental outcomes for that product, whether it be landfilling or burning, it never really sat well with me. It wasn't until it became financially viable that we actually looked at it. What caused that was China's national sword policy. When they implemented it, it stopped China from becoming the world's dumping ground, essentially, and really shone a light on the lack of recycling that was actually getting done onshore here and around the world as a whole. It opened up a huge market void for us as we were exporting upwards of 300 tonne a month of insulated copper cables at the time. When this policy was implemented, it really left us exposed and quite vulnerable. I jumped at the opportunity to step aside from being in a partnership with SRS Metals to try and solve this issue head on and bring it back home, where we could provide more sustainable outcomes and contribute more to the circular economy. And that's been our mission ever since. When we first started, it was just before the COVID pandemic. It was quite a challenging time to get into business. We've ridden out those waves and come out the other side, and we're here really trying to make a difference to the industry as a whole.
Once China stopped their policy, what was going on in Australia? Were we just putting cables in the bin, or what was going on? What was the recycling state in Australia at the time?
It was a bit of a frenzy at the time. There were a couple of companies around Australia ahead of the curve. There was one company up in Brisbane that we were dealing with at that time who had a cable granulation system, much the same, just on a smaller scale as to what I have here now in Victoria, it was a bit of a monopoly that they had on the market at the time. All the while, the Chinese buyers spread out across Southeast Asia and were setting up in different countries, which was never going to be a long-term outcome for them. China's policy was for a reason. It was becoming the world's dumping ground and it was polluted. And all those countries, once they realized that this waste was getting diverted to their country, quickly shut the door on it. What I think has been on the horizon for a long time is every country be responsible for their own waste stream, which makes perfect sense, right? If you're creating waste, why push it off onto someone else? Unfortunately, it's been allowed for so long, and once it leaves our shores, you've essentially washed your hands of it. When we're here, we're in one world, so essentially you're shipping it off somewhere else for them to deal with.
We should all take responsibility for our own rubbish and waste. Again, for context, and I talked about it in my intro, that the recovery, processing and recycling of cables, metals within the cables and PVC, it sounds like what was going on in the industry in 2018 was really just about the copper component. Copper is the main component of the cables, but there are other metals and there's PVC around it. Was there any recycling of the rest of the materials, and where J.R. Hammer is moving into in terms of delivering against that vision as well?
Yeah, it's a good point you raise. Unfortunately, only 2 to 5% of PVC is currently recycled within Australia, which tells you it's a huge issue. The way we like to reframe it is it's also a huge opportunity. Through the COVID pandemic, when we were limited here to our recycling outcomes, we were very restricted in only being able to focus on the copper, like you mentioned just before. It was all about high volume, high turnover, very slim margin. Unfortunately, most of our waste was going to landfill because we didn't have the opportunity to visit customers or explore research partnerships, which we've since done, where we can actually find viable solutions for the product. Back in 2018 and even earlier, it's always been more cost effective for businesses in the scrap industry to strip larger cables and take their outer sheath off through a stripping machine. Even still, you've got a commingled waste at the end, because when it comes down to a cable, different layers of insulations on those cables are made of different polymers. It's not one straight polymer when you recycle a cable. It could be a combination of PVC, some rubbers, some XLPE, some PP, lots of different polymers. It's very problematic. That's the trouble with PVC as a whole, because PVC is recyclable and recycles actually quite well if it is the one polymer going into its same products. Inside the manufacturing process, say if it's a bleed out of a PVC line that's going onto the coating of a cable, those bleed outs are endlessly recycled into a raw product again when they're re-extruded onto a cable. However, when it comes to the end of life that we're dealing with post-consumer, when you've got imported cables mixed with local supplied cables, different types of cables, it might be a telecommunication cable or a power cable, they're all coming together for the final process. When you're extracting the copper out, the polymer is actually quite a small granule size. Being able to detect and separate those is quite problematic. Throughout our time post-COVID, we've definitely tried to explore as many of these options as we possibly could. Over a couple of years, we were sending samples off to RMIT to build the foundation of a relationship and see what opportunities they think could come of it. Once we got to a certain point, we submitted for a CRCP grant, so it's a federal grant around solving the PVC problem as a whole. Obviously, we have industry specific where we want to target PVC conduits and or cable insulations. The PVC industry as a whole has a recycling rate of 2 to 5%, not just the cable industry. We have an invested interest in solving the cable side, but also it is such an industry-wide problem that why not try and solve those hard problems and really make a difference? If we can diminish that in one avenue, albeit just one of the polymers being PVC, then that's a great story to tell. We've also partnered with other innovative companies locally who have developed some technology around recycling our waste, where we're actually seeing some recycling outcomes, and we're really proud of that. And we've got quite a high recovery rate when it comes down to that, which is fantastic.
If the industry recovery rate is 2 to 5%, what's the recovery rate that J.R. Hammer's trying to achieve? Let's look at that both at the PVC level, which is 2 to 5%, but also the metals that come out of that. What are you trying to aim for, or where are you up to on that journey of recovering the whole components?
2 to 5% of PVC is an industry whole. That's not PVC recyclers specifically. That's generally falls into the allowance of other polymer recyclers, the allowance of PVC contaminated in their product. It may not even be that they're trying to recycle that PVC. It just might be the allowance they have for that polymer to be contaminated. It's harder to get an actual direct line on where the PVC recycling market fits. When we first set up our business, it was around tolling. We didn't want to deal with the volatile copper market at the time. It was quite erratic, especially through the pandemic with a lot of the mining closures and whatnot. It was very volatile in the metal market. We just wanted to be a lean, mean processing machine, essentially. We were solely focused on providing a service for other companies, our largest being the family business, as you mentioned earlier. They were providing us with 2 separate grades of copper to recover, one being clove, which is your highest grade, which is just essentially red copper metal, and cocoa being the second, which is a mixture of tinned copper and red metal copper combined together. It's a lower grade, so they sell it at a lower market rate based on the London Metal Exchange. We found that we had the highest uptake in early days when we were dealing with local consumers. 70 to 80% of the polymers recovered through the clove process that we were able to find an end market for. On the other side with the cocoa PVC, that was always more problematic. It proved to be a bit problematic because in those cables, you have not just polymer contamination, but some of your telecommunication cables have an aluminium foil, aluminium being so light and like a wafer essentially. On our separation table, you can only really sort 2 weighted materials, and the aluminium was seen as being a polymer, so it gets blown off with the polymers. It was harder for the downstream consumer to take on that material because it was more contaminated.
Thank you for that. And where are you in terms of today on recovery, and where are you heading to in terms of what percentage of materials are you hoping to be able to recover?
We've shifted our model away from just specifically tolling, where we're building out models on different methods of recovering cables back from industry to be able to process, and working with actual industry experts and industry partners who have a large footprint within the electrical industry. Through programs that we're rolling out, we can guarantee above 90% recovery rate when it comes to the combination of metals and polymers that come from a cable. We've refined our PVC recovery process to bring it back to a state where it can be vastly more consumed. In the state that we can get our PVC to, they can consume upwards of 25 tonne a week of that product. It's a really high pull-through market.
You mentioned a few different people that you're working with. Who, in an ideal world, are your clients? You've mentioned the family scrap metal business. Are scrap metal companies still a potential client? You mentioned some of the electrical suppliers as well. So can you give us some examples of who an ideal client is?
The electrical industry as being clientele rather than the waste industry as a whole. When you're dealing with a scrap metal trade or a scrap metal yard, it's really hard because they're dealing with all different waste streams coming in, not just specifically cables, for instance. Keeping a clean environment and being able to police what that contamination level will be is really difficult. Dealing with industry direct and trying to provide more sustainable outcomes, ideal a cable manufacturer who has extremely clean material, you know exactly what's in it, and we can recirculate that back into the same industry. We're trying to solve a circular problem for the electrical industry. Working with industry partners within the electrical industry is ideal, whether it be wholesalers, electricians directly. We fit in there as the recycler, the cable manufacturer. You've got all the key ingredients you need to be able to close that loop and tell that circular story for the industry as a whole right there.
Just so that we're all clear, especially when you talk about the circular economy in the context of the electrical industry, give us an overview of what you think about when you think the term circular economy, and what's the end goal that we're trying to get to here?
It's a great question. People frame it in different. You've got the circular economy as a whole, or the local circular economy. Being so isolated here down in Australia, I think we should be fitting into the local circular economy more than anything, especially when it comes down to this grant process. We're trying to extract the PVC resin to a certain grade where we can replace raw material, so we can solve those circular outcomes. On a product level, that's how I see it. When you look at it on a logistical level, we're trying to utilize the reverse logistics of the electrical industry as it is already, leveraging wholesalers' networks. Wholesalers are delivering these goods to and from sites to industry already. If they've got any offcuts or anything, that come back from site, why wouldn't the wholesaler collect them? Then we minimize the amount of traffic on the road. You're keeping your electrician's time spent on site. You're not having to accumulate a great deal of product just to worry about getting an extra couple of bucks in your pocket. But essentially, we're trying to tell that circular story on a local level as well as a product level.
I assume at a very simplistic level, a key client or partner with you would be the cables, laying new cables to bring all of their electrical waste either back to a retail distributor or back to JR Hammer so that you can then process.
Absolutely. We try to have an open door policy and be more upfront with what's going on, and have products here of recycled content that we've been participating in so they can see what's actually transpiring and have that bit of validation that we're dealing with a recycler that actually cares, rather than just someone that's trying to turn us over and get us out the door as quick as possible.
Has that been a hard shift to take up in the industry? There'll be people who believe heavily in recycling and sustainability who jump straight in, but there's going to be people who are skeptical and right at the other end of the extreme. How's the journey been in educating an industry to change practices?
It's been pretty fun, actually. When I first joined the scrap metal industry, it was my father's generation. Everyone was very closed book and secretive about who they were dealing with and what they were doing. There was no real care about anything sustainable. It was all dollars and cents and had to stack up financially or it was no good. We've come a long way as the next generation have come through, have that awareness and that care about their environment and doing things the right way. I think everyone's minds are starting to shift and that's being front of center. The building industry has caught up or is catching up. If you want to be on a construction site for certain size jobs, that you have the duty of care to make sure your waste streams are dealt with. And that's where we come in, because we're providing recycling outcomes and green certificates that hold weight. On average, the cables that we recycle, there's roughly 50% copper, 50% insulation. If you were going to a scrap metal yard and you asked them to issue with a recycling certificate, but that recycling certificate only validated half the weight of the material you took in, it doesn't really cut the mustard. We're issuing certificates upwards of 90%. It really goes a long way for the industry. We're trying to set that bar so high that the industry has to catch up and start doing the right thing. Cash for scrap was banned many years ago. A lot of people aren't aware of it because it's still flying around. By the sound of what's actually happening in the market, there's going to come a time and a place where that's going to be policed and it's going to catch a lot of people out. It's one of those industry changes that will have your late adopters, but most people are making the shift early and they're aware. I think it's been good.
The way we think about it and the way we think about marketing, if we can start by working with the people that believe in what we believe in, it's a much easier opportunity and there's enough of a market for them to provide a reasonable return.
Definitely.
To shift directions a little bit, I find that as business leaders, we often forget to celebrate achievements and wins. And JR Hammer's now coming up 7 years old. And I'd love to understand, what are you most proud of and why?
Gosh, that's actually crazy that you say it's nearly 7 years old. I feel like the first few years was such a blur with everything that was happening in the world that it was almost like a warm-up, I guess you could say, but it's nothing like adversity to go through to really appreciate the good times. A couple of the wins were being able to get through those challenging times. It got to a point where it was nearly impossible to hire staff because everyone was getting paid to stay at home. And when you're dealing in the waste industry, you're dealing with a lot of unskilled labor. Through that time, they were getting paid to stay home and not really take up work. So there was a few grim times through those years where it was literally me operating the whole facility, some late nights and sweaty tears. At the other end of that, we managed to take on some staff who have been absolutely magnificent. They haven't been from the industry whatsoever, but willing to give it a crack. And they're the most reliable and honest people that I would never look at doing business without, which has been a fantastic win. When we got the nod for the federal grant, that was a huge achievement. We're a very small operator, but to be acknowledged with something that grand was fantastic. That opened a lot of doors and a lot of introductions, which have helped us, especially in the last 12 to 18 months, with connections we've made and business contacts that we've built. It's looking like a promising outlook on the next couple of years as opposed to where we started. Can't believe you said nearly 7 years ago.
Yes, it does fly. I've heard the story that you're getting machinery from Italy as COVID and the world was shutting down. I can only imagine the trauma and stress that would have created as a very young business. I'm aware that your team is not a large team and you're definitely pushing well above your weight and trying to do lots of different things. At a very macro level, can you give us an overview of the operations today and what your top priorities are?
We built our business around a tolling process, which involves charging a price per ton of cable to process. What that meant is we would clean the copper for our clients and they would pick that up and we would deal with the waste, being the insulation, hence why it was such an important piece of the puzzle for us to bring together when we first started. We're now making the shift to get our brand out there and the awareness of what we're trying to achieve. We're in the process of rolling out a couple of those campaigns with the electrical wholesalers and building on the trading side. The tolling's great for volume and turnover, but when it comes to profit margin, it's quite slim, where there's more opportunity to make money from a trading perspective. Essentially, you're trading a stock market on the value of copper, you're hedging, you're bringing currencies into it. It takes it to a whole different level. We've got the recovery process down pat through the last 6 years of processing. Now it's time to put it to the test and see how efficient we can be from the trading perspective. We're gaining a lot of momentum with brand presence and awareness. We were welcomed as the first recycler to the Australian Cable Initiative, which is a sect of the Australian Cable Makers Associations. An article released a couple of years ago now by the industry saying that they were not performing to the sustainability level that they need to be. It was an industry-led shift to bring a recycler in. It coincided with just after us being given the nod for the federal grants. The timing was everything and the introduction was made and we were welcome, which has been fantastic.
What about on a personal level? Obviously, you're a small business with a small team and you've got a huge amount of things you're trying to achieve, both quite groundbreaking changes as well as you said, just working out operationally how to move a business from tolling to trading, from the recovery processes. What are the top 3 priorities and how do you make sure you remain focused on them every day?
It's very difficult to burn the candle at both ends most days. Yes, I'm a father of 3 beautiful children, Noah, Orlando and Paris. I try to be engulfed in their life as much as possible, as well as trying to operate a business and be a good husband. So it's very challenging. And I put my hand up to coach basketball teams and football teams as much as I can.
Just run triathlons.
As well as try to participate in triathlons. My way of dealing with it has been to keep a focus on myself rather than just business. I'm a very routine-based person. I feel I'm performing best and have the best mental acuteness when I'm in a good training regimen. I try to train most mornings during the week, and some say it's crazy hours. Some say the only hours that I have available. So I train 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, a few mornings a week. That's to work in with my family. That's the only way it can be done. And I know to be able to perform at my best as a husband and as a father and as well as operate a business, it's the only way to go about it. The second in line would be to make sure that my staff have everything they need and the best opportunity to perform the best they can on any one day. Being a very small team, there is a very strong reliance on each other. So I have to pull my weight when it comes to that as well. In that is being able to grow the business. So they have that confidence and validation that they're working for a business that aligns with what they're trying to achieve in life as well.
Thinking back over the last few years, when you think about a business and you're planning it, you make all these assumptions about how it's going to operate and the plans are going to have there. And then you go to market and realize that things are slightly different and you shift the business, you make changes to the way it's structured, tolling to trading. Can you think back over the last few years, has there been a significant change you've made in the business to address an obstacle or a challenge that's had a significant impact on the business and help you achieve the success you've created?
As you mentioned earlier about having the Chinese plant come that wasn't fit for purpose, we commenced operations here, even though we started the business in 2018. I think we commenced 1st of July 2019 when we turned the machine on for the first time. When I first purchased this machine, I was upsold to a model that was meant to be all great and wonderful and perform even greater, not just for cables, it could do a vast array of other things. The problem was when it arrived, it couldn't do cables at all, and that was our main supplies. I had to prove over a 3-month period that it wasn't fit for purpose until they agreed to replace it. When they came in to replace it, they were from Italy, the first country to go into lockdown. And just after they installed it and plugged it in, ready to go, they were given 2 hours notice to be at the airport. Otherwise, they'll be locked out of their own country. We had literally a crash course in how to turn it on, how to run it, and the maintenance to do, when in fact, it probably required a day and a half or 2 days of education. Over the first 3 months, I think we had one significantly large breakdown where it did massive internal damage to this machine. When I reached out for help from the supplier, they said, "Oh, if this happens, you need to replace it with a brand new one." I was left out in the lurch. At that time, I had a couple of staff here running the plant for me, which was great. The care factor that they had for maintenance on a machine was probably subpar. The most significant change that I've made in my business, which has helped our performance, is hiring women. Their care for maintenance, their care for machinery, their attention to detail has been fantastic. Our operations manager, Judy, here is easily the best onboarding of a staff member that I've ever done. She genuinely cares about the business and about what's happening here on an operational level, as well as on an emotional level. She has a great sense of being able to read my mood and standing up when I need her to. That's probably been the best. Hiring staff that actually care has been the biggest shift that I've found and the biggest help to us.
It is inspiring and motivating when we've got staff members that believe in what we're trying to achieve and drive us as human beings, as business leaders. They're driving us forward more than we're trying to drive them forward. It's enabling. What are the three things that you would think have contributed most to J.R. Hammer's sustained success?
Well, I wouldn't put us at a place where I'd say we've got sustained success yet. I would say we're edging closer to being a successful business. I guess it depends how you measure that in terms of being able to withstand the troubles that we've gone through. Yes, we're successful. We're still here. We're still standing and we're still trying new things to get ahead a bit more than where we have been. I think a good culture is imperative to have as part of a successful business. Over the next 6 to 12 months, that's going to be one of the main factors as we look to onboard a significant amount more staff when our space is a bit more available. Just being transparent and open with everyone rather than being a closed book, bringing everyone in your team into the fold of what we're trying to achieve is going to be the best way forward. I think we've still got a long way to go. I consider us a very successful business, but I think we're making strides in that direction now.
In terms of culture, if you could dig into that a little bit, how would you describe the culture you have today and what do you do every day or every week within the business to facilitate and grow the culture? And then as a follow-on, as the business grows, how do you expect you'll need to adjust the culture and the activities to facilitate the culture? What works today with a small team may not work if you double the team.
It's a great question and it's something I'm looking forward to exploring. There's only the three of us at the minute. So in terms of culture, it's nearly like a family where we all know the ins and outs of each other. It's a lot easier to manage on that level. I've just tried to say to the girls, we need to have an open book. If you start going home, building up any form of resentment over anything, then it's just going to fester and become a problem down the track. We just try to be as open and honest as we can be with each other. Our frustrations as well as our wins, celebrating the small wins and celebrating each other.
I find it's actually one of the hardest values to live up to because often it's lack of honesty to ourselves. But what's my gripe? And then suddenly goes from not appreciating I've got this niggly gripe to it's now blown out of proportion. It's always a key challenge. The advice that I have is to think about intentionally and not just hope that it works organically because what works small definitely doesn't work large.
Yeah.
I'm interested in celebrating wins and not birthday wins. They're important to celebrate as well. One of the reasons I ask all the owners I interview, what are you most proud of, is because we just don't stop and celebrate wins. We're just so focused on solving the next challenge that we don't take that moment. Is it a formal process of celebrating wins, or if something happens, you just pull the three of you together and talk about it? What do you do to celebrate wins?
Yeah, it's probably more of just being the small team. It's just bringing us together and acknowledging it and try to give validation where it's due. With the problematic machinery that I've had, there's been times where I've been stuck and haven't been able to get out to do something because it is very mechanically involved and quite heavy machinery. Sometimes I have to be present, which has had its challenges through the time. When they're just able to have a crack at doing something and they're able to do it, it just saves me the headache of having to manage my time and get out to them when I can't be. That's a small win for me because it allows me the time to work on other avenues of the trade, whether it be for trading or whatever it is, or it might be a new processing level that they've got to. There was one we got through just shy of 17 ton done in a day, which was their highest. When I was telling it at the end of the week before invoicing, I was like, that's amazing. I'd put a mural up on a whiteboard when they first came in the next day saying, congratulations on getting this. And then I took them out for lunch the next day. They weren't expecting it, but that little bit of acknowledgement put a smile on their face. So it wasn't for nothing. It's just small things like that.
Again, you're saying they're small things, but they're huge. If somebody on your team saves you half an hour of time because they fixed it, you call that a small win. I would class that as a huge win. It shows that they're taking the initiative to do that. And half an hour back in your day, a huge benefit. I find it with my stuff as well. They get so focused on the next piece of work they need to do, they forget to celebrate that, oh, we put a post out and we've got the most engagement we've ever had. Little wins like that give us all a bit of motivation to push harder the next day.
Absolutely. Even just the wholesaler social release that came out the other day, Judy was so over the moon with it. It was fantastic to see her excitement around it.
You've got the added benefit, which I think very few companies have, that your purpose is actually inspiring. If you believe in the circular economy and recycling and you're on staff at J.R. Hammer, then your beliefs align with what you do. Lots of people who work in companies that they love, but there's not necessarily that emotional connection to the broader purpose. The more you can play that out with your team and they can see the wins, it's only going to drive better motivation. As I said, we just need to think about how do we bring that out intentionally as the team grows. So push back up to big picture. If you could change one aspect of your business overnight, what would that be and why?
I would have made the shift towards trading earlier. I would have pulled that trigger a lot earlier and started building brand awareness a lot earlier than what we have. Obviously, hindsight's a beautiful thing, but it's something that I would definitely have explored much sooner.
There are plenty of things in my businesses where I've gone, why did I wait years to do that? When I jaw back into it, I find that it's either my own fear of change or something in my own mind limiting my desire to make that shift. Do you feel that there's something personally that could have held you back doing that, or it was purely a pragmatic process?
I think it was more out of a courtesy to my former business, who I do a lot of processing for. Because of the machinery issues earlier, they held out for me and put me back. Even though it put me back, it also had an effect on them. They stuck with me through that time. Out of courtesy to them, I thought I'd give them some clear air to really drive this and try to make this tolling process work. They never really nutted down and focused on it. I just needed to realize that a bit sooner, and I gave them probably a bit too much time.
Probably a testament to who you are, Josh.
I'd like to think so.
For me, one of the hardest lessons to learn is one that I've had to relearn a few times. And not that we all want to admit that we've made the same mistake a couple of times, but there's things over 25 years where I've made the same mistake again. Can you think back, and not just through J.R. Hammer, but at your other businesses that you've been involved in as well, is there a hard lesson that you had to learn and possibly relearn, and how has that impacted the business?
I think it's all around self-discipline. I like to have a schedule. I like to be in my routine. And when I'd personally let myself fall out of that routine, business always suffered, and my mental acuity would shift and my priorities would shift. Having to relearn that many times through the years has been the biggest realization, not just on a business front, but on a personal level as well. Relationships suffer as well. When you look after yourself and you look after your own health, you perform at a much higher level. I've probably missed some opportunities through the years for not being at peak performance, and that's been hard lessons to learn.
How do you approach your workday, and do you have the same routine driven into your day to make sure the day is as successful as it can be?
I like starting the morning training and doing something very hard in terms of training in the morning. I feel that I'm more acute and more on as soon as I start the day than if I were to sleep in or press the snooze button, for instance, like I did this morning. It's something mentally inside me that if I've worked hard in the morning, everything that I'm doing is a bonus through the day, rather than mentally beating myself up that you haven't tried or you haven't worked hard enough today.
Just to bring things to a close, a great strategy is focused on the most impactful activities. In our experience, at any point, company can really effectively work on only a finite number of internal priorities, typically 3 or 4. Can you talk about some of your current strategic initiative? And what's really interesting to understand is the decision process you use to determine these priorities.
Great question. I like to always keep it interesting, and many things going on in a day. One thing that really disrupts my day is machinery breakdowns. If you don't get that small win in the morning, it can throw everything out. And that's been some of my biggest suffering. Through my time with getting that early morning, the girls start quite early here. That early morning, this isn't working, Josh. So your whole morning's thrown into disarray, then it throws everything behind. We're working on proper machinery upgrades where we don't have to worry about that currently. My biggest 3 priorities would be executing this rollout with the wholesalers and making sure that all our deliverables are on time and we're not being the party that's going to affect how successful it is or not. Another priority of trying to relocate this other company out of my factory, I guess, is the second biggest, and try to aid them as much as I can because I don't need it turning ugly. The third would probably be the innovation piece, working with the universities and CSIRO. We're the lead applicant in that grant process, and we own all the IP that comes of the research that happens, but I'm aware that they've got many other projects on it at any one time. It's easy for them to just take the payday and not achieve what they need to achieve, making sure that I'm staying on top of those guys, because that's where our business becomes fully circular essentially, and it makes it almost unachievable for any other company doing what we do to achieve the recycling rates that we can for the electrical industry.
Just to focus on that last one, is that really about, not just about the altruistic drive to improve recycling in Australia, but when you look at that from a J.R. Hammer perspective, is that essentially building a moat around your business so that competitors realize the opportunity, they just won't be able to keep up with you and you can move much faster ahead?
Absolutely. At the moment, everyone else that is doing something similar to what we do is landfilling all their waste. When you add in the cost that they pay to dispose of the material after processing, it means that if we're getting paid for that material, our processing rate reduces. We are miles ahead in terms of price factor, but also the sustainability rate as well. Just through being awarded that grant and through the limited amount of marketing we've done so far, I've had a lot of outreach from waste companies who manage other companies' waste processes on their end, reach out and offer us what they deem waste, which is the PVC from insulation. You're talking upwards of 80 to 100 tonne per month. Some of these companies that they're already trying to manage, they can pay to dispose of. So it's another revenue stream you can do. If we can actually nut down these processes and make sure that the innovation piece comes together, it means that those other companies are actually reliant on us to reach sustainability levels. It just puts us that far ahead. So it's quite critical.
Thank you for that. As I said in my introduction, your belief around waste is unnecessary, unintelligent, unsustainable, and uncommercial. In just that last answer, you've demonstrated how necessary it is, how you can approach it intelligently and to build it both a commercial and a sustainable outcome in what seems to be a very short time frame. We're not talking decades away, we're talking a handful of years away. Where do you see the business going in the next 5 to 10 years? And what do you think are the key obstacles you would need to overcome to get there?
When you're in a bit of a phase like we are now, to look beyond, say, the next 6 months when we're trying to make the shift that we're making. In an ideal world, I'd love to say we'd be able to have a circular economy and have that, albeit in a small-ish scale, being able to tell the circular story for copper cables as a whole, be able to solve that here and start drawing out plans to replicate that interstate.
It's great. And we definitely look forward to being part of that story as well. Josh, that was the final question. Thank you for allowing us to explore J.R. Hammer and sharing your experiences and lessons and teaching us all about circular economy and recycling. And as I said, I look forward to watching and being part of the success and changing the way Australia approaches cable waste.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate it.